Police shoot Black veteran's wife. He trained the world's deadliest soldiers. It was supposed to be a quiet night, just a normal drive home after a nice dinner. But everything changed in an instant. Police cars with flashing lights pulled over a simple sedan on a dark road. What started as a routine traffic stop quickly turned into a nightmare no one could have expected. In that car was a woman, a beloved teacher in her community. She wasn't doing anything wrong, but the officers who approached her didn't see her as a teacher or a wife. They saw a problem. Before anyone could understand what was happening, gunshots rang out in the still night. The woman collapsed, her life slipping away on that lonely road. People in the town were left stunned and confused. How could something like this happen? How could a routine stop turn so deadly? The news spread fast. Friends, neighbors, and students mourned. The community was filled with shock, sadness, and anger. This was more than just a tragic accident. There was something deeper, something dark hiding beneath the surface. Her husband, a man few truly understood, held her in his arms as the life faded from her eyes. He was no ordinary man. He was a veteran, a soldier trained in the most secret and dangerous parts of the military. For years, he had worked quietly, teaching and guiding some of the world's most elite soldiers. But after his service, he had turned his strength and skills towards something else, helping his community, mentoring youth, and trying to make a better future. He wasn't a man who sought violence. He chose peace. But now, in this moment of heartbreak, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just about his wife anymore. It was about justice. It was about truth. And he knew the people responsible were not just careless officers. They were part of a corrupt system. A system that protected the rich and powerful while silencing those who dared to stand up. As he held his wife's broken body, his mind raced. He knew this was just the beginning. The fight ahead would be dangerous. The people he was up against were strong, with deep connections and a lot to lose. But he had something else: experience, determination, and a promise he made. To the woman he loved, he would not rest until justice was served. This night wasn't just a tragedy, it was a spark. A spark that would ignite a battle between a man fighting for what's right and a town hiding dark secrets. It was the start of a journey that would change everything. After that terrible night, the quiet streets of the town didn't feel the same anymore. The woman who had been shot was not just a teacher. She was a light in her community. For years, she had worked hard, helping students who had been written off by others. Kids who were struggling with their own problems found hope in her classroom. She believed in second chances and in the power of kindness. Her smile, her patience, and her faith in people had made a difference in many lives. Her husband shared her vision. After years of serving his country in some of the most dangerous places on earth, he came home wanting to give back. He started mentoring young people, especially those who felt lost or forgotten. He used the discipline and focus he had learned in the military to teach them not only how to defend themselves, but how to build better futures. The community center where he worked became a safe space, a place where kids could find guidance and a sense of belonging. But not everyone wanted them to succeed. There was a powerful family in town, wealthy and connected, who ruled behind the scenes. Their son was well known for causing trouble, selling drugs, breaking rules, and acting above the law. The woman, brave and determined, caught him in the act one day at school. She confronted him, telling him she wouldn't let him get away with it. That simple act of courage set off a dangerous chain of events. The family used their influence to protect their own. They had friends in the police department and in local government. The sheriff, a man who should have been protecting all citizens, was instead working with this family, turning a blind eye to their crimes. This was the system the veteran and his wife had quietly fought against, but now it was clear the fight was far from over. Threats were made. Intimidation was used to silence voices like theirs. But the woman didn't back down. She continued teaching, continuing to stand for what was right. Her husband, watching from the sidelines, knew the risk they were taking. But he also knew that sometimes standing up was the only choice left. The community began to notice the tension. Whispers spread about the growing conflict between the Crosses, the veteran and his wife, and the powerful families who didn't want change. It wasn't just a battle between individuals, it was a battle for the soul of the town. Behind closed doors, the corrupt sheriff made plans. He saw the veterans' programs and the wife's influence as threats to his control. The mentorship and teaching were empowering the people, making them question the authority that had long ruled without accountability. The sheriff decided that to maintain his power, he would have to silence them, starting with the wife. What happened on Aishi? That quiet night was no accident. It was a tragic result of a system that valued power and control over justice and truth. The veteran's wife became a victim not just of a traffic stop gone wrong, but of a larger plan to protect a corrupt empire. Now, the veteran faced a new reality. His peaceful life was shattered, and the woman he loved was gone. But in her death, a new mission was born. He had to find justice, not just for her, but for the whole community. To do that, he would have to face enemies more dangerous than any he had met in combat. Enemies who controlled the very institutions meant to keep people safe. The fight ahead was not only about right and wrong. It was about breaking the chains of corruption and giving the town back to its people. It was about turning pain into strength and loss into hope. And so, with a heavy heart but steady mind, the veteran prepared to face a battle unlike any he had ever known. The night of the traffic stop was supposed to be ordinary, just a routine check, a quick interaction with the police. But for the veteran and his wife, it became the moment that changed everything. The veteran was behind the wheel, calm but alert. He knew the police in this town too well. Some were fair, but others were anything but. As the flashing lights appeared in the rearview mirror, a cold feeling settled in his chest. It wasn't just a traffic stop. It was something darker. Two officers approached the car. One was familiar, the other a younger face he didn't recognize. The veteran kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, his voice steady as he answered their questions. He knew his rights, but he also knew that in this town, rights didn't always mean protection. The officers said they were investigating a robbery in the area and claimed the car matched a description. The veteran's wife sat quietly beside him, her eyes tired but trusting. She had no idea this stop would end in tragedy. The tension grew as the officers asked them to step out. More police cars arrived, 6 officers now surrounding the couple, in the dim light. The situation was spiraling fast. The veteran remained composed, trying to keep his wife calm, telling her to cooperate. Then everything happened in a blur. One officer got too close to the wife, and when she tried to stand her ground, things escalated. Words were exchanged, voices raised, and then a sudden shove. The wife's body pressed against the car, a moment of chaos breaking the night's silence. Before anyone could react, a gunshot cracked through the air. The veteran's world shattered as he saw his wife fall, the blood blooming on her dress like a terrible stain. His scream tore through the night as he caught her, refusing to let go. The officers backed away, their faces a mix of shock and something darker, fear, guilt, maybe something worse. But the damage was done. The woman who had spent her life helping others was now lying on cold asphalt, her life fading away. Instead of rushing to help, the officers began spinning a story. One about self-defense, about a threat, about a weapon found in the car. But the veteran knew the truth. There was no gun, no threat, only a brutal and unnecessary shooting. When he was arrested, The veteran's mind raced. The system that was supposed to protect him was now turning against him. He was charged with assaulting officers, resisting arrest, and worse, painted as the violent ex-soldier who had lost control. But he was far from violent. He was grieving, desperate to protect his wife's memory and find justice. Inside the cold jail cell, surrounded by harsh lights and unyielding walls, he planned. His military training kicked in, observing every detail, every routine, every weakness. He was no stranger to hostile environments. This was just another mission, one with the highest stakes. He thought about his wife, about the community they had built together, the lies being told, the corruption hiding in plain sight. This was bigger than one traffic stop. This was about a town where power ruled over truth, where justice was twisted by those in control. The veteran wasn't alone. There were whispers of allies, people inside the system who wanted to see the truth come out. A message arrived, a sign that help was near. But for now, he had to stay strong, stay patient. His wife's death was a wound that would never fully heal, but it was also a fire that lit a new path. He would fight, not just for her, but for every person silenced by corruption and fear. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, and he was ready. Days passed inside the cold, cramped jail cell. The veteran sat quietly, his body confined but his mind racing faster than ever. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the dull hum of distant voices filtered through the walls. Yet, despite the bleakness around him, his military training kicked in, calm, focused, always calculating. He watched the guards' routines, when they changed shifts, how they moved, what habits they had. He memorized the layout of the facility, noting blind spots in the cameras and weaknesses in the locks. To most, he might have seemed broken, defeated by grief and injustice. But inside, he was gathering strength, building a plan. Grief was a powerful thing, and it had settled deep in his chest. His wife's face haunted him, not as she lay wounded that night, but alive, smiling, full of hope. He replayed their last conversations, her determination to protect the students, her belief that they could make a difference. But the system had failed her. The people sworn to protect had turned their weapons against her, silencing her forever. And now, the man who had trained soldiers to face danger was trapped, accused, and surrounded by enemies wearing badges. One day, a new face appeared. A man older, weathered, but with eyes that showed he understood the world's hidden battles. He was a stranger to most, but the veteran recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't just any inmate. This was someone who had fought battles of his own, a former intelligence officer, quietly watching, waiting. In a hushed conversation, the older man revealed himself as someone who had been tracking the corrupt sheriff and his allies for years. He spoke of secret evidence, hidden connections, and a shadowy figure known only as Cypher, a mysterious ally working to expose the truth. The veteran's pulse quickened. This was the break he needed, but escape wouldn't be simple. The forces arrayed against him were powerful and ruthless. The sheriff was already spinning lies, planting false evidence and lining up witnesses to discredit him. The corrupt officers were ready to do whatever it took to keep their secrets buried. Still, the veteran refused to be a victim. He knew violence wasn't the answer, at least not yet. The plan was bigger than revenge. It was about exposing the truth, dismantling a criminal network that had poisoned the town for too long. He promised himself that justice would be served, not just for his wife, but for every person who had suffered under this system. As the days turned into weeks, the veteran prepared. He used his knowledge of strategy, patience, and discipline to turn the jail from a prison into a battlefield of the mind. Every detail mattered, every moment was an opportunity, and when the right moment came, he would strike. The day of the veteran's escape arrived quietly, without fanfare. He had spent weeks watching, waiting, planning every move with the precision that once guided soldiers through the toughest missions. Inside the cold walls of the jail, he had learned every guard's routine, every camera's blind spot, every lock's weakness. When the guards came to escort him to a psychiatric evaluation, a move by the sheriff to label him unstable, he saw his chance. Calm and composed, he walked with his hands cuffed, head bowed, the picture of a broken man. No one suspected that beneath that calm exterior, a storm was gathering. As they passed the common area, chaos suddenly erupted. An inmate known to him, the older man from intelligence, flipped a card table and shouted, creating a scene loud enough to pull the guards' attention away. Guards rushed to break up the fight, leaving only one officer to escort the veteran. In one swift, practiced motion, the veteran struck, using the chain between his cuffs to trap the officer's arm, then delivered a precise blow to his throat. The guard crumpled silently. The veteran grabbed the keys from the fallen officer, quickly unlocking his cuffs. Freedom was within reach. He moved through the jail's corridors with purpose, avoiding security cameras and guards with the skill of a shadow. But then, at the exit, he came face to face with the sheriff himself, a man bloated with power but weak in real combat. They froze, eyes locking in a tense standoff. The sheriff reached for his gun, but the veteran was faster. A precise strike to the wrist disarmed him, followed by a brutal punch that left the sheriff gasping on the floor. "This is for her," the veteran growled, the name of his wife, burning in his mind. Without hesitation, he took the sheriff's ID and keys, using them to slip out the door and into the night. The world outside was dark, but the veteran's mind was clear. He drove away in the sheriff's own car, the irony not lost on him. He knew the authorities would be after him, but he wasn't running to hide. He was running to fight back. Back in the shadows, allies waited. The mysterious cipher, the intelligence. Officer and an old war buddy known for his survival skills had gathered to help. Together, they planned the first strike against the corrupt empire that had taken everything from him. The veteran's first move was precise and deliberate. An attack on the warehouses where drugs, weapons, and dirty money were stored. Explosions lit up the night, small enough to avoid civilian harm, but loud enough to send a clear message. The fight had begun. The corrupt officials panicked. The sheriff's office scrambled to respond, mercenaries were hired, and the wealthy family whose son had caused so much trouble realized their control was slipping. But the veteran was just getting started. He knew the battle ahead would be long and dangerous. His mission was not just revenge, it was justice. He would tear down the corrupt system piece by piece, exposing lies and bringing criminals to light. And no matter the cost, he would honor the woman who had believed in him and in a better future. The night was thick with tension as the veteran prepared for the final confrontation. Every step he took was calculated, every move precise. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for truth, for justice, for the memory of the woman he had lost. The old police training facility stood silent and abandoned. On the outskirts of town, its broken windows and crumbling walls a stark reminder of a time when law enforcement was meant to serve and protect. Now, it would become the stage for exposing the darkest parts of that very system. The sheriff and his hired mercenaries approached cautiously, confident in their numbers but unaware of the veteran's resolve. As they entered the building, traps and diversions exploded around them, small charges that stunned and confused, creating chaos in the narrow hallways. The mercenaries struggled to maintain order, their training tested against the unexpected. Tactics of a man who had once trained soldiers like them. Amid the smoke and confusion, the veteran moved silently, like a ghost from his past life. He wasn't there to kill, not anymore. He was there to reveal the truth. In the central room, under a harsh overhead light, he waited. A single chair stood in the middle, and beside it, A camera recorded every moment. This was no ordinary fight. This was a confrontation with power and corruption. The sheriff entered, shotgun raised but shaken. The veteran stepped forward, calm but unwavering. The words that followed were sharp, accusing, and impossible to ignore. He spoke of lies, of cover-ups, of a town poisoned by greed and violence. Caught off guard, the sheriff tried to deny, to deflect. But then, the veteran revealed the evidence, a video confession, recorded and saved just for this moment. The sheriff's face paled as he realized the empire he built was crumbling. The mercenaries, realizing the tide had turned, dropped their weapons and retreated. The sheriff was left alone, defeated not by force, but by truth. Minutes later, FBI agents arrived, surrounding the building and taking control. The veteran, hands raised, surrendered peacefully. Justice was finally within reach. Outside, the community watched with a mix of relief and hope. The truth had been hidden for too long, but now it was out in the open. The woman's name was cleared and her killer's lies were exposed. But the fight wasn't over. The veteran knew this was just the beginning, that healing would take time, and that the corruption ran deeper than one man or one town. Still, in that moment, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, there was a sense of victory. Not just for the veteran, but for everyone who had believed in justice, even when it seemed impossible. He had lost his wife, but he had gained something else, a chance to make things right, and he would not waste it. The courtroom was packed with people who had waited a long time for justice. Friends, neighbors, students, and strangers all gathered to witness what had become the most important trial in the town's history. The veteran sat quietly at the defense table, wearing a simple suit that looked too big on his lean frame. The months behind bars and the weight of everything he had endured showed in the tired lines of his face, but his eyes were steady and focused. The trial was not easy. The prosecutors painted him as a dangerous vigilante, a man who had taken the law into his own hands and disrupted the peace. But his attorney fought back fiercely, telling the story of corruption, lies, and cover-ups. She showed how the system had failed him and his wife, and how his desperate actions had been the only way to expose the truth. Witnesses came forward, former officers, community members, even federal agents, who spoke of the deep-rooted corruption that had poisoned the town for years. Evidence poured in, videos, recordings, and documents that laid bare the criminal network run by the sheriff and the wealthy businessman. The veteran listened quietly as the past months were laid out for all to see, the lies told to cover up, his wife's death, the threats against the community, and his own journey from soldier to mentor to avenger. Throughout it all, the town was divided. Some still feared him, believing the stories of violence and chaos. But many saw the truth, a man broken by loss but driven by an unshakable commitment to justice. After long days of testimony and arguments, the jury finally retreated to deliberate. The veteran sat alone for a moment, thinking of his wife, her courage, her kindness, and her belief in a better future. He wondered if he had honored her, if the path he chose was the right one. When the jury returned, the courtroom fell silent. The foreman spoke carefully, delivering the verdict. On lesser charges, he was found guilty, a recognition of his actions outside the law. But on the most serious charge, the jury ruled in his favor, accepting that he acted out of necessity, when no other option remained. The judge, with a heavy heart, sentenced him to probation and community service, allowing him to continue the work he had started long before tragedy struck. Outside the courthouse, the community gathered to show support. The veteran felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost had been too high. His wife was gone, and nothing could bring her back. In the weeks that followed, the town began to heal. The corrupt officials were removed, investigations continued, and new leaders emerged, people committed to transparency and fairness. The veteran returned to the community center, dedicating himself to mentoring the youth and rebuilding what had been broken. He found hope in the faces of the young people he guided, reminding him of the wife he lost and the future they had dreamed of together. Though the wounds ran deep, the veteran understood that healing was possible. It would take time, patience, and a commitment to fight not with violence, but with truth and love. One evening, standing by the quiet grave where his wife rested, he placed a single white rose and whispered a promise that her light would never fade and that her legacy would live on in every life touched by their work. The fight for justice was far from over, but now it was a fight with hope. And as the sun set over the town, the veteran looked ahead, ready to carry the torch forward. A man transformed by loss, strengthened by love, and determined to make a difference.